In society, there are certain entertainment values that are considered to withstand the tests of time. These phenomena are investigated by self-proclaimed aficionado Mark Allen and an elite squad of like-minded individuals known as the Special Geek Unit. Hello and welcome to Pop Culture SGU. I'm your host, Mark Allen. So this is our first episode, and I thought it only fair to introduce myself and how I came up with the title. First off, let me say that coming up with a catchy podcast title is not easy. Granted, it's not rocket science, but it's no walk in the park either. I wanted to be sure to include the word pop in it, and needless to say, this is proving something of a challenge. I checked various websites, and those sites gave me a list of names that I really didn't care for. So I just started brainstorming. I thought of a few different puns or play on words that include the word pop, such as Supersized Pop with Mark, Wizard of Pop, No Culture for Old Pop, etc. and so on. I posted all the titles I came up with into a poll on a Dad's Geek group that I am part of, and with an overwhelming response, Pop Culture SGU won out. Now let me say I've never watched a single episode of Law & Order SVU, so I had to look at the opening narrative and write a parody, and find an appropriate theme song. Special shout out to Ben Sound for the use of royalty-free music there. If you need to find a type of music to use and not have to pay an arm and a leg, try searching Ben Sound. That is just my personal opinion. I have not received any compensation as yet from them regarding this plug. Okay, so what's this podcast all about? Well, pop culture, of course. I grew up in the 1980s and it was a great time of trickle-down economics, excess, and more memorable tropes and quotable movie lines than almost any other decade in my humble opinion. I love all things 80s. The Goldbergs is one of my favorite shows for that very reason. If you've not yet seen it, I recommend checking it out. It's like the Wonder Years for my generation. I remember collecting certain toys from the 1980s along with watching TV shows and movies that I now consider classic. Toy lines that had cartoon tie-ins, which admittedly was most of them, were among my favorites since I could watch a show and reenact in my own way what I had just seen. Today I would like to talk about a few of these shows and toy lines briefly, since they will be a regular feature in the podcast. First up, G.I. Joe. Yo, Joe! That's right, you can't talk about the 1980s without mentioning this massive toy line and cartoon series. Massive, get it? I'm so funny! Okay, sorry Cobra Commander, I thought it was a great pun for our Joe fans out there, considering the premiere storyline from 1985 entitled The Mass Device.
Now stop sputtering like a wet toaster and get busy!
Okay, I'm on it. So after the Star Wars toys did so well for Kenner in the late 1970s, Hasbro decided they needed a line that would give Kenner a run for their money and reintroduce the public to G.I. Joe. The initial line of 3 3/4-inch G.I. Joe, a real American hero action figures, debuted in the summer of 1982, with such features as state-of-the-art articulation, accessories, and packaging that featured a military-style data card for the included figure. 9 Joes, Breaker, a communications officer, Flash, a laser rifle trooper, Grunt, a standard infantry trooper, Rock and Roll, a machine gunner who was formerly a surfer from Malibu, Scarlet, the first female-produced figure, was a counterintelligence officer, Short Fuse, a mortar soldier, and Snake Eyes, one of the most popular ninja characters to ever grace the small screen. Stalker, a minority ranger from Detroit, Michigan, was fluent in 5 languages, and Zap, the first bazooka soldier. These were released on carded packaging, much like those used on the Star Wars figurines. An additional 4 Joes, Clutch, Grand Slam, Hawk, and Steeler, were included with some of the 7 vehicles that made up the original toy line. Sorry, Cobra fans, only 2 Cobra figures, a Cobra soldier and a Cobra officer, were also released on carded packages that inaugural year, with Cobra Commander being a special mail-away offer. Aww. Yeah, it's a tragedy. However, that tragedy would be short-lived since the first year sales projections for the new line of G.I. Joe toys was $12 to $15 million. The line would go on to sell over $50 million worth of product and was the hot new toy to have that Christmas. Balderdash! Okay, I've had enough of you, Commander. How dare you do that? Oh, Sergeant Slaughter!
I can't hunt! I'm Sergeant Slaughter. Yo!
Get me out of here!
Okay, much better. The cartoon was made possible thanks to government deregulation during the administration of President Reagan that resulted in new rules for children's television programming. G.I. Joe, an all-American hero, was one of the first cartoons to benefit from these new rules, which permitted the FCC to air violent war cartoons featuring toy products as the main characters. It's safe to say that the strategy worked. The National Coalition on Television Violence reported a 350% increase in the sale of war toys between 1982 and 1985, no doubt largely due to the cross-platform success of G.I. Joe. I'll be talking more in depth about particular G.I. Joe toys in future episodes of this very podcast. Also hailing from the 1980s, a hybrid of G.I. Joe and Transformers. Yep, that's right. Mask, Mobile Armored Strike Command with a K. Seriously, Command with a K. I guess it makes the anagram complete. However, there are plenty of other K words that I think could have been used instead. How about Killers? Well, that would definitely not be approved by a censor board. Kittens? Okay, perhaps Command is not so bad after all. Mask holds a special place in my heart, and I've even included a chapter of it in my book entitled Stuff in My Attic. In future episodes, I will share various insights and stories from behind the beloved toy line. For those not familiar with Mask, it is a cartoon and toy line produced by Kenner in 1985. An amalgam of G.I. Joe and Transformers about a covert specialized military team that operates vehicles that convert into other vehicles, like a motorcycle that converts into a one-man attack helicopter, or a Camaro that converts into a jet. Each operative wears a helmet or mask that provides a variety of technical wizardry. Of course, no 80s action cartoon would be complete without the inclusion of the forces of the bad guy. G.I. Joe had Cobra, Mask had Venom. Again with the anagrams. Oh, Kenner, you sneaky devils. Venom stands for Vicious Evil Network of Mayhem. Mayhem here being Miles Mayhem, the leader of the baddies.
Out with it! Stop blubbering, you idiots!
Mask didn't quite have the same shelf life as its predecessors, but the awesome toys and its subsequent animated series worked their way into our collective hearts. Aww. Mask didn't hide the fact that it was a cartoon designed to sell toys to children, nor was it really shy about some of its influences. Obviously, Venom is essentially Cobra on a much smaller scale, if Cobra drove Decepticons to work. It shouldn't work at all, but there's a certain charm to the animated series. Aside from being forced to use certain characters and vehicles/toys, the writers had free reign to go wherever they wanted, which would explain why the show shifted from espionage and science fantasy-based storylines to racing storylines in its second and final season. The first Mask toy I got was a neon green motorcycle and attack helicopter by the codename Condor, driven or flown by part-time rock star and Mask agent Brad Turner.
Personnel selected. Brad Turner, motorcycle and helicopter pilot, vehicle code name Condor.
Agent Brad Turner used his Hocus Pocus mask. His first appearance was in the pilot episode entitled The Death Stone. Armed with this Hocus Pocus mask, he would often trick Venom right into a trap. Hocus Pocus would project images or holograms, sometimes hard light holograms, depending on what the writers needed at that time. In a lot of ways, the 80s cartoon still holds up. Sure, it's dated, but really the cheesiness and campiness is half the fun. Some other toy lines that had cartoon tie-ins, and trust me, there were a lot of them in the 1980s. We will cover in future episodes include, but are not limited to, Ghostbusters, Beetlejuice, Silverhawks, Thundercats, He-Man, Masters of the Universe, Voltron, and yes, even the California Raisins. That's all I have for this week. Join me next time as I begin a 3-part series entitled Land, Sea, and Air. We'll look at some specific toys, movies, and games that have to do with the topic of land. Until next time, I'm exiting with catchphrase, Go Get Popped!